Hello, my name is Mesut Durukal. I'm a software test automation engineer, and in daily basis, I'm automating test cases to be able to run them automatically to ensure the continuous testing. But when we are talking about test automation, we mean writing test cases in different languages by using different tools and frameworks, right? So this is something that sometimes we have to think wisely and we have to decide about. Because whenever I start a new project or whenever I start writing new test suites, then which language should I use? Or which frameworks, libraries, or tools should I leverage into my test automation environment? Because deciding about the components of the test automation environment is very important. Because if, in a way, if I make a wrong decision, like choosing the less efficient tools or frameworks or other components, then I might have several struggles. Maybe the code that I write would not be easy to understand, maybe even would not be easy to implement, right? Or maybe the test cases I implement would be slowly running. So I might have several struggles. So deciding the correct components is a very important decision. So in this talk, I will not tell you which language is the best, or maybe even which tools or the frameworks is the best to use. But don't worry, I will tell you how we can make this decision. So this will be almost like instead of giving you a fish, just teaching you how to catch this fish. So let's discuss and let's understand ways to do this decision and mastering the E2E test automation framework selection. So I will share you my personal story, like what kind of roadmap I followed, and hopefully this will be a baseline for you as well. So you can continue, you can follow the same path, and you can make your decision eventually. So of course, for everyone, the decision can be a different choice or option, but this path and continuing several checklists would be the best solution to make this decision. So, what kind of decision criteria I can consider to make my choice or the decision? Of course, I can first consider the execution speed, right? Because we are talking about time. Time is very precious. Because when we are doing the continuous testing and think about we have several merge requests, and if all these requests or all these pipelines are waiting for the test results and tests are blocking the pipelines for a long time, of course it would not be acceptable, right? So execution speed is one decision criterion. Other than that, ease of coding. Like if I choose one language or framework in which I really struggle to implement different implementation scenarios or maybe corner cases, then again, it would not be the best choice for me. Other than that, I need some flexibility. Like sometimes I have to execute my test cases on different platforms. Sometimes I have to change my viewport or desktop size to simulate the mobile application, or sometimes I will just change the browser that I'm using to simulate different use cases. All the users might use different execution environments or platforms to simulate their use scenarios. So, my tools or frameworks should be flexible enough to give me this chance to cover different execution environments. For example, sometimes I see some frameworks which are not supporting different browsers like Safari. It is a little bit challenging, not as easy as Chrome or Firefox. So this can be another decision criterion based on my requirements. If Safari is a browser that I have to cover, then I can consider this as well. So always the decision criterion will be based on my requirements. What is my priorities? What are my requirements? What am I supposed to cover? So this will be the baseline. So based on these requirements or priorities, I will build my choice. Other than that, of course, the documentation and the support, like whenever I have some problems, should I easily find a solution? Or even whenever I raise a ticket to the community or even the developers of the framework, am I immediately supported or someone helps me or not? This might be another decision criterion. Or even the features or free or licensed features, right? Sometimes in some frameworks, there are pretty cool features, but I have to pay to use that. And of course, as expected, I don't want to pay too much to those kind of extra features. So if all these kind of features are free or just charged, this might be something else that I can consider. And eventually, the feature compatibility. Again, depending on the requirements, like am I doing the cross origin testing? Like, am I jumping or navigating through different URLs, or different domains, or maybe am I opening some new tabs, new windows? Am I handling the drop down menus? So lots of different features we can talk about. This will be my baseline, so I can construct or develop my choice or decision depending on this reference list. But what should be the roadmap to perform this evaluation or the consideration? So personally, what I did is, first of all, I tried to do a literature survey. Like I tried to understand which tools are getting the highest attention or the interest in the community, and I try to understand what other people are tending to use or maybe even tending to learn. So in this way, I could already collect some insights and tips about the interest rates in the community, right? Because before everything else, this could be a good starting point to perform a literature survey. Eventually, I will do my personal evaluation as well. But first of all, let's check what the community thinks about different options in general. So for this purpose, I found a survey to which almost 40,000 people joined. They were asked several questions. For example, the retention rate, if they want to use the framework that they are already using or not, or maybe even the interest rate, like if they want to learn some other tools or not, or even the usage, like if they are already using, and the awareness, like maybe if they already know at all or not. So after considering and investigating the details of this survey, I already get some highlights or some tips about the usages. For example, some frameworks were gaining some acceleration in time. So I could imagine that maybe they are getting more popular, and maybe it means they are having a good support, community support, and maybe they are adding some extra features which were really appealing for the testing community. And other than that, based on this literature survey, what I did next is go through some different head to head comparisons. For example, this was an example where Cypress and Playwright ambassadors sit together and they provide their solutions across different problems. So they went through lots of several aspects like the element interactions or dealing with iframes or maybe even waiting for elements on the pages. And after demonstrating each solution, they asked the audience to vote for which option they find more convenient. So eventually, of course, they leave the choice to the audience, but one important comparison they made in the study was the execution speed. So they implemented the same scenario and they just let to run on the same resources, same type of resources. And what they figured out is Playwright was running 4.6 times faster than Cypress. So of course they had different results from different aspects, but this execution speed was just one other comparison dimension. And of course, similarly, we I found lots of several studies, and for example, this one is another one. And here, the author went through a specific problem where there was a cross-domain issue, cross-origin issue. So in the middle of the test, the scenario jumps to another domain. So we can see in Playwright, it is a little bit more straightforward to handle this situation, but in Cypress, we have to introduce some more steps or some more code algorithms to handle this situation. So, personally, for me, ease of coding was also very important. So, what I figured out is both Cypress and Playwright are working in an asynchronous way. So, we have to wait for the asynchronous calls properly. So, to wait to do that in Playwright is just introducing the await keywords. But in Cypress, it's not that much straightforward. So, first of all, we have to wrap the request, and after we get the response, by introducing then blocks, we should continue with the rest of the steps. So it was introducing some more blocks, and the coding was a little bit more complex in Cypress. And other than that, I implemented the same scenario with the both options. Then I try to understand the readability, like how it feels when we just read the code. For example, I'll just read a line from here in this test, like in Cypress example, sci.get search button. So I'm getting the search button from the search page and then should be disabled. It's almost like natural language that we are using in daily life, right? When I read this line, I could immediately understand the button should be disabled. That is almost like the normal language that we are using. In Playwright, it's slightly different, but very similar. But I can say Cypress might be a little bit better in terms of the readability of the code. And I went through similar studies to compare head to head Test Cafe and Cypress, or Selenium versus Cypress, and even Selenium versus Playwright. And in each of them, I collected several metrics, even including the execution durations with different resources. And the last step in my benchmark roadmap was having the personal developer experience, right? So for this purpose, I picked a test scenario which was already implemented in my current solution. And it was a very simple scenario, which was just going to a landing page and then checking the search button, which should be first disabled. And then after typing something into a text field, then I assert that the button is becoming enabled, and then eventually I click and then I check the URL. So this is just a few actions, like doing some checks on the buttons and text fields, and then doing some user actions like typing some queries in the text box, and then again verifying the URL of the page. So in this scenario, it's very simple. There is no complicated things like dealing with alerts or iframes or drop-down menus or opening new tabs, new windows. It's super simple. But in my case, the important things are: first, I have to do this scenario with a mobile viewport because I'm not testing the mobile native app, but instead, at least, I want to simulate the mobile desktop, the mobile version, the mobile viewport. And then the system that I'm testing was not responsive. So even if I change the viewport, I change to the mobile size, still it doesn't totally simulate the mobile version. So I had to change the request headers. So first of all, I have to intercept, I have to catch the request, then I have to add some custom headers manually, then I have to send my request, and eventually I should catch the responses. And finally, I'm living in Japan. I'm testing the systems which would be provided to the Japanese users. And in Japan, the traffic, most of the traffic is coming from Safari, because people love here using iOS or iOS devices or operating systems, which means they are mostly using Safari as their browser. So it is important for me. So in this case, the framework that I should use should support executing the test cases on Safari browser as well. So I implemented this scenario with all the options that I was considering, like Cypress, Playwright, Testcafe, Selenium, and Nightwatch. And I collected several metrics after doing this experience, and eventually I highlight the strengths and the weaknesses of each option. For example, some of them were really very lightweight and fast, but some of them were missing some feature supports, like especially the corner cases. Like maybe whenever you have some pop up windows, alerts, or drop down menu items, or maybe whenever you open a new tab, sometimes, or whenever you jump to a different domain, which is like a cross domain issues. Some of them were struggling. So eventually, I collect all the strengths and weaknesses, and I made my choice. So, call for actions. I'm not saying any of this is the best. Of course, the choice or the decision should depend on our priorities. For example, in my case, Safari execution was important, so I could not proceed with Cypress. But I know that Cypress has a lot of strengths, like even the dashboard, the reporting, which is namely nowadays called as Cypress Cloud, which is a very good feature, by which means you can track the test flakiness and all the other execution metrics. And of course, it has some different strengths. But the key point is be aware of what you need, like which browsers you want to execute, or what kind of elements or components you will deal with, you will interact with in the elements. Will you have alerts or pop-up windows? Will you do some cross-domain issues, cross-domain scenarios, and basically what you will cover? And depending on these requirements, you can evaluate all these options, you can consider every alternative, and you can make the best choice. But the key, again, remembering the decision criterion. The key points are execution speed, the feature support that you need, and ease of coding, and even ease of reading the code, the readability of the code, and flexibility. Like whenever you want to change or scale something, if it is already supporting or not. And of course, the community support and the documentation is also very important. So these are all the important things to make the best choice, to decide about the tools or the frameworks that we will leverage in our test automation environment. Hope it was helpful and you can utilize this approach and roadmap to make your choice. Thanks for listening to me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.